Well, I don't think it's as difficult to figure out competence as it may appear to you. If you're 5'2", you don't have much of a future in the National Basketball League. And if you're 95 years of age, you probably shouldn't try and act the romantic lead part in Hollywood. And if you weigh 350 pounds, you probably shouldn't try and dance the lead part in the Bolshoi Ballet. And if you can hardly count cards at all, you probably shouldn't try and win chess tournaments playing blindfolded, and so on and so on.
You're ruling out everything I want to do.
But competency is a relative concept. And what a lot of us need, including the one speaking, is what I needed to get ahead was to compete against idiots. And luckily there's a large supply. And
Bill Gross made recent comments that his generation of investors, yourselves included, owed a deal of their success to timing. Do you agree with Bill's comment? And do you think a similar opportunity will provide itself to today's investors? Thank you.
Yeah, there's no question that being born in the United States was a huge, huge, huge advantage to me. And as I pointed out in a recent article, being born male was a big advantage. I would not have had the same opportunities in the investment or in business world remotely that I've had if I'd been a female born in 1930. And the timing could have been a little better. Actually, my dad was a security salesman, and I was conceived in November 1929, and if you remember, the stocks had gone down dramatically at that time, and there really wasn't anybody to call on for my dad, and there wasn't any television at home or anything. So here I am, so I feel myself very lucky that the crash of 1929 came along, and that also provided a decade, more than a decade, of people who were very turned off. Well, it was a decade of terrible business for quite a while, and then a decade or more of people that were turned off on stocks, just as we sort of had a decade like that in the past decade, going up to 2010 or so. A lot of people that had gotten turned off by stocks. So that was a favorable environment. But the United States itself was an incredibly favorable environment. If I'd been born 5 years earlier, I probably would have made more money. But if I'd been born 10 or 15 years later, I would have made probably less money. But I envy the baby that's being born today in the United States. I mean, I think on a probability basis, that's the luckiest individual that's ever been born. And I think that they will do very well in life in all kinds of ways on a probability basis, better than existed when I was born. And I think they'll have opportunities to do very well in the investment field. It may not be as good a field as it was for me starting in 51 or thereabouts, but it will be a very good field to operate in. The person that has a passion for investing, born today, coming of age 20 years from now, is likely, in my view, to do very well and to live far better than we live today, just as we live far better than John D. Rockefeller lived many years ago. Charlie?
Well, the competition was very weak in your early days, and I don't think the competition is as weak now. So I think that, sure, we got advantages from timing, but I don't think that means there's nothing to be done ahead.
But Charlie, in 2008 and 9, there were all kinds of high IQ, highly experienced investment professionals. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And you invested at the Daily Journal company in some equities at X that are worth what, 3X or 4X now or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah, well, I call that opportunity, but it may be routine to him, but
Yeah, but I sat for a lot of years before I did it.
but it still became available.
Oh, yes, but you were drowning in opportunities when I first knew you. You were
But
not waiting for.
I wasn't drowning in money, unfortunately.
No, what you lacked was money.
Yeah. Well, now we got money and no ideas. Okay, station 10. Station 10? Do we have a station 10? Let's take a look. Should be right over there.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Dexter Ang. I'm from Stafford, Virginia. I'm 30 years old, and I'm wondering what my life will be like in a few years, let alone 50 years from now. My question for both Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger is, how do you think you've changed over the last 50 years? And if you could communicate to yourself 50 years ago, what would you tell him, one piece of advice, business or personal? And how would you do it in a way where your former self would actually heed it?
Charlie, I'll let you answer that. Incidentally, I'll trade you places, so don't worry about your future.
Yeah, we're basically so old-fashioned that we're boringly trite. We think you ought to keep plugging along and stay rational and stay energetic, and just all the old virtues still work. And
But find what turns you on. You know.
yeah, you gotta work where you're turned on. I don't know about Warren, but I have never succeeded to any great extent in something I didn't like doing.
Charlie and I both started in the same grocery store, and neither one of us are in the grocery business.
We were not going to be promoted either, and even though you had the family name.
Yeah. Well. My grandfather was right, too. No, it's really, I mean, if you're lucky, and Charlie and I were lucky in this respect, we were lucky to be in this country to start with, but we found things we liked to do very early in life, and then we pushed very hard in doing those things. But we were enjoying it while we did it. We have had so much fun running Berkshire. I mean, it's almost sinful, but we were lucky to. My dad happened to be in a business that he didn't find very interesting, but I found very interesting. And so when I would go down on Saturday, there were a lot of books to read, and it just flowed from a very early age. And Charlie found it.
You found a way to atone for your sins and having so much fun. You're giving all the money back.
Well, yeah, but you give it all back whether you want to or not in the end.
No, that's true too.
I really connect with the idea of not investing in industries you can't fully understand. Being a young guy who has limited ability to code and who can't build robots, tech is certainly a young guy who has limited ability to code and who can't build robots. Tech is certainly not an industry I fully understand. And yet these days, the concept of entrepreneurship is nearly synonymous with tech amongst people my age. So my question to you, Mr. Buffett, is if you were 23 years old with entrepreneurial tendencies, what non-tech industry would you start a business in and why?
I'd probably do just what I did when I was 23. I would go into the investment business, and I would look at lots of companies, and I would go and talk to lots of people, and I would try to learn from them what I could about different industries. One thing I did when I was 23, if I got interested in the coal business, I would go out and see the CEOs of 8 or 10 coal companies. And the interesting thing was I never made appointments usually or anything. I just dropped in, but they fellow from Omaha who looked like me couldn't be too harmful, so they'd always see me. And I'd ask them a lot of questions, but one question I'd always ask them, two questions at the end. I would ask them if they had to put all of their money into any coal company except their own and go away for 10 years and couldn't change it, which one would it be and why? And then I would say, after I got an answer to that, I would say, and if as part of that deal, they had to sell short an equivalent amount of money in one coal company, which would it be and why? And if I went around and talked to everybody in the coal business about that, I would know more about the coal companies from an economic standpoint than any one of those managers probably would. So I think there's lots of ways to learn about business. You're not going to learn how to start another Facebook or Google that way, but you can learn a lot about the economic characteristics of companies by reading, personal contact. You do have to have a real curiosity about it. I mean, I don't think you can do it because your mother's telling you to do it or something of the sort. I think it really has to turn you on. And I mean, what could turn you on more around asking questions about coal companies? Yeah, that maybe be a little odd too, but that's what I would do. And I might, in the process of doing that, find some industry that particularly interested me. In my case, the insurance industry did. And you might become very well equipped, even perhaps to start your own insurance company, but perhaps to pick the most logical one to go to work for. If you just keep learning things, something will come along that you'll find extremely useful to do. I mean, but you've got to be open to it. Charlie?
Well, you might try a version of the trick that Larry Bird used. When he wanted an agent to negotiate his new contract, he asked every agent why he should be selected, and if he was not going to be selected, whom the agent would recommend. And since everybody recommended the same number two choice, Larry Bird just hired him and negotiated the best contract in history. There are a lot of tricks that people use.
We did the same thing as Solomon, actually. It was a Saturday morning when I called, and you were there, Charlie, weren't you?
Yeah,
sure. I called in, I don't know whether it was 8 or 10 of the managers. I just gotten in there on Friday afternoon, and now it's Saturday morning, and we had to open for business Sunday night in Tokyo, and I had to have somebody to run the place. So I called in 8 people, and I said, who beside you would be the ideal person to run this and why? One guy told me that there was nobody compared to him. He was gone from the firm within a few months, but it's not a bad system to use. You can really learn a lot just by asking. I mean, it's starting to sound a little bit like a Yogi Berra quote or something, but it is literally true that if you talk to enough people about something they know something about, and people like to talk, and here we are talking ourselves. And you just have to be open to it, and you will find your spot. You may not find it the first day or the week or month, but you'll find what fascinates you. I was very lucky because I found what fascinated me when I was 7 or 8 years of age. But some people find chess or music, fascinates them when they're 4 or 5. If you're lucky, you find it early, and sometimes it takes you longer, but you'll find it.
If it's a very competitive business, and it plainly requires qualities that you lack, it should probably be avoided. When I was at Caltech, I took thermodynamics, and Homer Joe Stewart, who was a genius, taught the course. And it was perfectly apparent to me that no amount of time or effort would turn me into a Homer Joe Stewart. He was utterly, impossibly more talented than I could be. I immediately decided I wasn't going to try and be a professor of thermodynamics at Caltech. And I've done that with field after field, and pretty soon there was only 1 or 2 left.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a similar experience in athletics. I probably shouldn't tell you this when Charlie was having a little trouble there on those last 2 words. I get a little worried about Charlie. Don't know whether I should talk about this, but I thought maybe he was losing his hearing, and I didn't want to confront him with it. I mean, we've been pals for a long time, so I went to the doctor and I said, Doc, I've got this wonderful partner, but I think maybe his hearing is going on him, and I don't want to talk to him about it. I mean, how do you say that to somebody you've known that long? And what should I do? He says, well, you stand across the room, talk to him in a normal course of tone of voice, and let me know what happens. So the next time I was with Charlie, I stood across the room and I said, Charlie, I think we ought to buy General Motors at 35. Do you agree? Not a flicker. I go halfway across the room. I said, Charlie, I think we ought to buy General Motors at 35. Do you agree? Nothing. Get right next to him, in his ear. Charlie, I think we ought to buy General Motors at 35. Do you agree? He said, for the third time, yes.